The millionaire returned home earlier than expected and froze when he saw the maid helping his 7-year-old paraplegic son walk. What he did next left everyone speechless. Don't forget to hit that like button and tell me in the comments what you think happened next. Your theories always blow my mind. The marble floors of the Sullivan mansion gleamed under the afternoon sun as Marcus Sullivan's black Mercedes pulled into the circular driveway earlier than usual. At 32, Marcus had built a financial empire that most could only dream of. Hedge funds, real estate portfolios, and tech investments that had made him one of the youngest billionaires in Chicago. His angular jawline and piercing blue eyes reflected the same intensity that had driven him to the top of the financial world. But today, those eyes carried an exhaustion that no amount of money could cure. He loosened his Hermes tie as he walked through the front door, the familiar scent of jasmine from the foyer's elaborate floral arrangements greeting him. The house felt different somehow. There was an energy he couldn't quite place, a subtle shift in the usual afternoon silence that had become his family's norm. For 3 years, since the accident that had stolen his son's ability to walk, this mansion had been more tomb than home. "Elena?" he called out, expecting to hear the soft-spoken voice of their housekeeper responding from the kitchen. Helena Morales had been with them for 2 years now, a quiet woman in her early 30s who had somehow managed to bring small moments of light into their darkened world. She had a way with 7-year-old Tommy that even Marcus struggled to understand, patience that seemed endless, and a gentle manner that could coax smiles from his son when nothing else could. But instead of Elena's voice, he heard something that made his blood freeze in his veins. "Come on, Mijo, just one more step, I know you can do it." Marcus's briefcase slipped from his fingers, landing with a dull thud on the Italian marble. The voice was coming from the living room, and it was Elena's voice, but the words, those impossible words, made his heart race with a mixture of fury and confusion that he had never experienced before. He moved silently toward the sound, his designer shoes silent against the floor. Through the doorway he could see into the vast living room where afternoon light streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows. What he saw there would haunt him for the rest of his life. Tommy, his beautiful 7-year-old son with sandy brown hair and eyes just like Marcus's own, was standing. Actually standing, supported by Elena's steady hands, taking small, shaking steps across the Persian rug. The wheelchair sat empty near the window, abandoned like a discarded shell. "That's it, baby," Elena whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Your legs remember. They remember how to carry you." Marcus felt the world tilt around him. 3 years of the finest specialists, the most expensive treatments, experimental procedures that had cost him hundreds of thousands. All of them had said the same thing. The spinal damage was too severe. Tommy would never walk again. They had all been clear, definitive, certain. And yet here was his son, taking steps. The rage that filled Marcus was unlike anything he had ever felt in boardrooms full of hostile takeovers or late-night negotiations worth millions. This wasn't just defiance of medical opinion. This was cruelty. This was giving false hope to a child who had already suffered enough. This was exactly the kind of dangerous delusion that he had spent 3 years helping Tommy accept and overcome. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" The words exploded from him like gunfire. Elena spun around, her dark eyes wide with surprise and fear. In that moment of distraction, Tommy wobbled and began to fall. Elena caught him just in time, but the magic of the moment was shattered. Tommy looked up at his father with confusion and something that looked like shame, and Marcus felt a sharp pain in his chest that he chose to ignore. "Mr. Sullivan, I can explain," Elena began, but Marcus cut her off with a gesture that would have silenced a room full of executives. "You're fired." The words came out cold and precise, each syllable delivered like a hammer blow. "Pack your things and get out of my house. Now." Tommy's small voice broke the terrible silence that followed. "Daddy, I was walking. Elena helped me walk." Marcus knelt down to his son's level, forcing his voice to be gentle despite the storm raging inside him. "Son, you know what the doctors said. Sometimes people want to help so badly that they make us think impossible things are possible. It's not fair to you, and I won't let anyone give you false hope again." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears, but she said nothing as she helped Tommy back into his wheelchair. The boy's face crumpled with disappointment, and he wouldn't look at either adult. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. "Elena, please," Marcus continued, his voice regaining its boardroom authority. "I need you gone within the hour. I'll have your final paycheck ready." As Elena wheeled Tommy toward his room, Marcus heard her whisper something in Spanish that he didn't understand. But the way his son reached back to squeeze her hand told him everything he needed to know about the bond he was about to sever. An hour later, Marcus watched from his office window as Eleanor loaded her few belongings into an old Toyota Camry. She looked up at the house once, her gaze finding his window, and for a moment he thought he saw something in her expression that wasn't just sadness, it was pity. That night, as Marcus sat in his study with a glass of whiskey, he convinced himself he had made the right choice. He was protecting his son from disappointment, from the cruel cycle of hope and despair that had nearly destroyed them both in the months after the accident. But when he checked on Tommy before bed, he found his son staring out the window with tears streaming down his face. "She believed in me, Daddy," Tommy whispered. "Why doesn't anyone believe in me anymore?" Marcus had no answer for that question, and as he closed his son's bedroom door, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. Hit that like button if this story is getting intense, and drop a comment telling me what you think Marcus should do next. The next 3 weeks passed like a slow hemorrhage of hope through the Sullivan mansion. Marcus threw himself into work, with an intensity that impressed even his most demanding clients, closing deals worth millions, while his home life quietly collapsed around the edges. He hired a new housekeeper, Mrs. Henderson, an efficient woman in her 50s who maintained the house perfectly, but treated Tommy with the polite distance of a professional caregiver rather than the warm affection Elena had shown. Tommy had stopped asking about Elena after the first week, but the change in him was devastating. The boy who had once filled the house with laughter and chatter now spent hours staring out windows, picking at meals that Mrs. Henderson prepared with technical perfection, but no love. Physical therapy sessions became battles of will, with Tommy refusing to participate in exercises he had once approached, with Elena's encouraged enthusiasm. "He's depressed," Dr. Rachel Martinez, Tommy's pediatric psychologist, told Marcus during a consultation that felt more like an intervention. Children with spinal injuries often go through these cycles, but this seems triggered by a specific loss rather than his condition. Marcus sat across from her in the sterile comfort of her office, his perfectly pressed suit, a stark contrast to the colorful, child-friendly decor surrounding them. "He's 7 years old. He'll adjust. Children are resilient." Dr. Martinez's expression was patient but firm. "Not all adjustments are healthy, Marcus. Tommy talks about Elena constantly. He says she was the only one who thought he could get better. Whether that's medically accurate or not, her belief meant something profound to him." "False hope is cruel," Marcus replied, the words automatic now, a defense he had built and rebuilt every day since the firing. "The best specialists in the country have been clear about his condition." "But what if it wasn't false?" Dr. Martinez leaned forward slightly. "What if there was something about her approach, her methods, that we don't understand? Marcus, I've seen the video footage from your home security system that you provided. Whatever Elena was doing, Tommy was responding in ways we haven't seen since his accident. The security footage. Marcus had watched it dozens of times, frame by frame, trying to understand what he had witnessed that afternoon. Eleanor's techniques weren't anything revolutionary, just gentle stretching, encouraging words, and an unwavering belief that somehow Tommy's body could heal itself. But the results spoke for themselves. Tommy had taken steps, actual, real, undeniable steps. "The spinal cord damage is extensive," Marcus said, repeating the mantra that had become his refuge. "Dr. Wellington was very clear. Dr. Wellington is brilliant, but he's not infallible," Dr. Martinez interrupted. "Recovery patterns for spinal injuries, especially in children, can be unpredictable. Sometimes healing happens in ways we don't fully understand." That evening, Marcus found himself standing in Tommy's doorway, watching his son sleep. The boy's face, so peaceful in rest, reminded him achingly of his late wife, Sarah. She had died in the same car accident that had paralyzed Tommy. And sometimes Marcus wondered if he had been so focused on protecting his son from further loss that he had forgotten to help him truly live. "I miss her, Daddy," came Tommy's small voice from the darkness. Marcus stepped into the room, his heart heavy. "I miss Mommy too, son." "No, I miss Elena." Tommy's words were matter-of-fact, but they hit Marcus like a physical blow. "She made me feel like I could do anything, like maybe someday I could run and play soccer like other kids." Marcus sat on the edge of Tommy's bed, struggling to find the right words. "Tommy, I need you to understand something. The doctors have explained." "Elena said doctors are smart, but they don't know everything," Tommy interrupted, his voice gaining strength. "She said miracles happen when people believe hard enough and work hard enough. She said her grandmother walked again, after doctors said she never would." For a moment, Marcus felt his carefully constructed worldview wavering. Elena had never struck him as the type to fill a child's head with fairy tales. In fact, she had been remarkably practical about most things: meal planning, household schedules, Tommy's daily care routine. Why would she lie about something so important? "Did Elena tell you other stories like that?" Marcus found himself asking. Tommy nodded eagerly. "She told me about her little sister Sophia, who couldn't hear when she was born, but she can hear now, and about her cousin Manuel, who couldn't speak until he was 6, but now he's a teacher. Elena says sometimes our bodies just need more time and more love to remember how to work right." Something cold settled in Marcus's stomach. These weren't vague, inspirational tales. They sounded like real people, real situations. What if Elena hadn't been offering false hope? What if she had been sharing genuine experiences, real reasons to believe that recovery was possible? The next morning, Marcus found himself doing something he hadn't done since college, questioning his own certainty. He pulled Elena's employment file from his locked drawer and studied it more carefully than he had when hiring her. Excellent references, all from families with special needs children. A note from one family saying she had been instrumental in their daughter's remarkable recovery progress. He picked up his phone 3 times to call her, and 3 times set it down without dialing. By noon, he was standing outside Dr. Wellington's office without an appointment, demanding to see the man who had delivered Tommy's diagnosis with such crushing finality. The conversation that followed would change everything Marcus thought he knew about his son's condition. "Mr. Sullivan," Dr. Wellington said, adjusting his glasses as he reviewed Tommy's file. "I'm surprised to see you. Is Tommy experiencing complications? I need to know about recovery possibilities, not what you told me before. I need to know about cases where children with similar injuries have improved beyond initial prognosis." Dr. Wellington was quiet for a long moment. "There have been some cases, rare ones. The nervous system in children is remarkably plastic, especially with intensive therapy and—" He paused. "Well, with the right kind of encouragement and stimulation." "How rare?" Marcus pressed. "Perhaps 5% of cases show significant, unexpected improvement, usually within the first 3 to 5 years post-injury." "But Marcus, I didn't want to give you false hope." "You mean there was hope and you chose not to tell me?" The words came out sharper than Marcus intended. Dr. Wellington's composure cracked slightly. "The odds were so low. I've seen too many families destroy themselves chasing impossible dreams. I thought it was kinder to help you and Tommy accept reality." Marcus left that office with his hands shaking and his worldview in ruins. For 3 years, he had been protecting his son from hope. For 3 years, Eleanor had been the only one still fighting for Tommy's future, and he had fired her for it. That night, he sat in his study with Elena's personnel file spread before him. Her home address was listed as a small apartment complex on the south side of the city, a 40-minute drive from the mansion, in a neighborhood Marcus had never visited. Her emergency contact was listed as Sophia Morales' sister, Sophia. The little sister who couldn't hear but now could. Marcus poured himself another whiskey and stared at the address until the numbers blurred together. Tomorrow, he would have to do something that went against every instinct he had developed as a successful businessman. Tomorrow, he would have to admit, he had been catastrophically wrong. Let me know in the comments if you're feeling the emotions building. This story is about to take a turn that will surprise everyone. The drive to Elena's neighborhood felt longer than any business trip Marcus had ever taken. His Tesla Model S looked absurdly out of place, among the modest apartment buildings and corner bodegas that lined the streets of Little Village. As he parked outside the address from Elena's file, he noticed children playing in a small courtyard between buildings, children laughing, running, living the carefree life that had been stolen from his own son. The apartment building was older, but well-maintained, with neat flower boxes in most windows and a sense of community that Marcus's exclusive neighborhood had never possessed. He climbed to the third floor, his heart pounding in a way that had nothing to do with physical exertion and everything to do with the conversation he was about to have. The nameplate read E. Morales in careful handwriting. Marcus knocked softly, then waited, rehearsing words that felt inadequate for what he needed to say. The door opened to reveal Eleanor, but not as he remembered her. She looked smaller somehow, wearing simple jeans and a faded sweater, instead of the crisp uniforms she had worn at his house. Her dark eyes widened with surprise when she saw him, and for a moment neither of them spoke. "Mr. Sullivan?" she said finally, her voice cautious. "Is Tommy okay? Is he hurt?" The concern in her voice, immediate and genuine despite how badly Marcus had treated her, hit him like a physical blow. He's not hurt physically." "But Elena, I need to talk to you, please." She hesitated, then stepped aside to let him enter. The apartment was small but immaculately clean, filled with photographs and artwork that spoke of a life rich in relationships, even if poor in material wealth. What caught Marcus's attention immediately was a collection of medical certificates and therapy certifications hanging on one wall, credentials he had never thought to ask about when he hired her. "You're a licensed physical therapist," he said, studying the diplomas. Elena nodded, moving to clear some papers from the small kitchen table. "I specialized in pediatric rehabilitation before I needed work that paid better to help my family. Why didn't you tell me? When I hired you as a housekeeper, why didn't you mention your qualifications?" Elena's smile was sad, but not bitter. "You hired me to clean and cook, Mr. Sullivan. You made it very clear that Tommy's medical care was handled by specialists. I wasn't supposed to interfere with that." Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks as he remembered his own words from Elena's first day of work. He had indeed been very specific about boundaries, about staying in her lane, about not overstepping her role. But then understanding dawned on him like a cold sunrise. "You were helping him anyway, against my instructions." "I couldn't watch him give up," Elena said simply, settling into a chair across from him. "Children's bodies want to heal, Mr. Sullivan. Sometimes they just need someone to believe it's possible. The doctors said, the doctors are very smart, but they don't know Tommy like I do. They see test results and measurements. I see a little boy who moves his legs in his sleep, who has muscle tone that's stronger than his diagnosis suggests, who showed me tiny improvements every day that no one else was looking for." Marcus stared at her, processing words that were rearranging everything he thought he understood about his son's condition. What kind of improvements? Eleanor stood and moved to a small desk in the corner, returning with a notebook that she placed before him. "I kept track, every day. Small movements, responses to stimulus, moments when his reflexes seemed stronger. I didn't want to give false hope, but I also couldn't ignore what I was seeing." The notebook was filled with careful observations written in Elena's neat handwriting. Dates, times, detailed notes about Tommy's responses to different exercises and activities. Dad read like a medical journal kept by someone who truly understood rehabilitation science. "May 20th, Marcus read aloud. "Tommy lifted his right leg 2 inches during stretching exercise, held position for 3 seconds. His voice trailed off as he continued reading entries that painted a picture of gradual, steady improvement over months. "I've been doing this for 15 years, Elena said quietly. "I've seen children recover from injuries that doctors said were permanent. Not often, but enough to know that healing doesn't always follow textbook predictions." Marcus looked up from the notebook, his world reshaping itself around this new information. "Why didn't you show me this? Why keep it secret?" Elena's expression grew guarded. "Because men like you don't listen to housekeepers, Mr. Sullivan. Even housekeepers with medical degrees. You had already decided what was possible for your son, and anyone who disagreed with your experts was just an obstacle to overcome." The truth of her words hit him like cold water. He had dismissed her observations, her suggestions, even her gentle questions about Tommy's therapy routine. He had seen her as well-meaning but unqualified, someone whose emotional attachment to Tommy clouded her judgment. "I was wrong," he said, the words feeling foreign in his mouth. "I was completely, utterly wrong." Elena studied his face for a long moment. "Tommy has been asking about me. Every day he's stopped trying in therapy. He barely speaks. Elena, I think I've broken something in him that I don't know how to fix." She was quiet for several heartbeats, and when she spoke, her voice was gentle but firm. "Children heal from many things, Mr. Sullivan, but they need to believe that someone believes in them. Tommy had that with me, and he can have it again. But not if the people he loves most keep telling him that trying is pointless." Marcus closed the notebook and met her eyes. "What would it take? For you to come back? I'll double your salary, triple it if necessary. I'll give you whatever title you want. Physical therapist, care coordinator, whatever makes this right." "It's not about money," Elena said softly. "It's about whether you're ready to believe in your son. Because if you're not, if you're just hiring me to make yourself feel better about firing me, then I'll only break his heart again when you change your mind the first time progress seems slow." Marcus felt something crack open inside his chest. A wall he had built around his heart 3 years ago, when watching his son fight for his life in a hospital room had nearly destroyed him. He had chosen certainty over hope, because hope had felt too dangerous, too likely to lead to more devastating loss. "I want to believe," he whispered, the words barely audible. "I just don't know how anymore." Elena reached across the table and briefly touched his hand. "Then maybe that's where we start, with wanting to believe. The rest we can learn together." Outside, the sound of children playing drifted up from the courtyard below, and for the first time in 3 years, Marcus allowed himself to imagine his son among them. But neither of them knew that the real challenges were just beginning, or that Elena's own secrets would soon threaten everything they hoped to build together. Introduction. As Elena prepared to return to the Sullivan mansion, neither she nor Marcus knew that Tommy's medical files contained a crucial detail that had been overlooked for 3 years. The truth about his condition was about to surface in the most unexpected way. But no one imagined what would come next. Smash that like button and tell me in the comments, do you think Elena has a secret that changes everything? The morning Elena returned to the Sullivan mansion, the house felt different. Even Mrs. Henderson, who had maintained professional politeness for 3 weeks, seemed to sense the shift in energy as Elena walked through the front door with a small duffel bag containing her personal belongings and a larger bag filled with specialized equipment that Marcus had never seen before. "Elena!" Tommy's voice echoed through the foyer as his wheelchair practically flew across the marble floors. For the first time since Eleanor's departure, genuine joy lit up his face, and Marcus felt his throat tighten as he watched his son transform from the listless shadow he had become. "Hola, mi amor," Elena said, kneeling to Tommy's eye level and embracing him with the kind of warmth that seemed to radiate through the entire room. "I missed you so much. Are you ready to work together again?" Tommy nodded so enthusiastically that his sandy hair bounced. "I've been practicing the exercises you taught me. Well, trying to. It's harder without you." Marcus watched this reunion from the living room doorway, feeling like an outsider in his own home. The bond between Elena and his son was undeniable, built on something deeper than the professional relationships Tommy had with his various specialists. There was trust here and love, and something that looked remarkably like faith. "Mr. Sullivan," Elena said, standing and addressing him formally but with warmth in her eyes, "thank you for giving me this chance. I promise you won't regret it." "Call me Marcus," he said, the words feeling like the first honest thing he had said in weeks. "And Elena, I'm the one who should be thanking you for not giving up on him when I did." Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus watched Elena work with Tommy in ways that defied everything he thought he knew about medical rehabilitation. She didn't push his son beyond his limits, but she also didn't accept limitations that seemed arbitrary. Every exercise was accompanied by stories. Every stretch was wrapped in games that made Tommy laugh even when the work was difficult. Most importantly, she documented everything. Each session was recorded, measured, and analyzed with scientific rigor that impressed even Marcus's business-oriented mind. The improvements were small but undeniable: increased muscle tone, better reflexes, moments of voluntary movement that Dr. Wellington's tests had suggested were impossible. "Today we're going to try something new," Elena announced one Thursday afternoon as Marcus watched from his office doorway. She had set up what looked like a mini rehabilitation center in their converted game room. Parallel bars, exercise mats, resistance equipment that looked professional grade. "What is it?" Tommy asked eagerly. "We're going to teach your brain to remember something it thinks it forgot," Elena explained, her voice taking on the tone of someone sharing an exciting secret. "Sometimes when our bodies get hurt, our brains get confused and forget how to send the right messages to our muscles. But your brain is very smart, Tommy. Smarter than the confusion." Marcus found himself stepping closer, genuinely curious about Elena's methods. This wasn't the vague encouragement he had expected. It sounded like legitimate neuroplasticity therapy, concepts he recognized from his own research into cutting-edge treatments that were often too experimental for doctors to recommend. "How do we teach my brain?" Tommy asked. Elena smiled and began setting up a series of visual and tactile exercises that Marcus had never seen before. "We're going to use mirrors, music, and imagination to remind your nervous system what walking feels like. Your body remembers, mijo. We just need to help it find the memory." What followed was the most focused Marcus had ever seen his son. For 90 minutes, Tommy worked through exercises that combined mental visualization with gentle physical movement, all while Elena provided a constant stream of encouragement and technical guidance that sounded increasingly professional. "Elena," Marcus said when the session ended and Tommy was resting, "where did you learn these techniques? This isn't standard physical therapy." Elena was quiet for a moment, cleaning the equipment with practiced efficiency. "I spent 5 years studying under Dr. Carmen Rodriguez at the Instituto de Rehabilitación in Mexico City before coming to the United States. She pioneered techniques for spinal recovery that many American doctors consider unconventional." "Unconventional how?" "Dr. Rodriguez believes that emotional and spiritual healing are as important as physical therapy. That children especially need to heal their relationship with their own bodies before their bodies can heal. American medicine sometimes focuses so much on what's broken that it forgets to nurture what still works." That evening, Marcus found himself researching Dr. Carmen Rodriguez until well past midnight. What he discovered made him question not just Tommy's diagnosis, but his own understanding of what modern medicine could and couldn't accomplish. Dr. Rodriguez had published papers in international journals about recovery patterns in pediatric spinal injuries that showed significantly higher success rates than American studies reported. The difference, according to her research, wasn't in medical technique. It was in approach, treating the child as someone with unlimited potential rather than someone with a permanent limitation. "Elena," Marcus said the next morning as they prepared for another session, "I need to ask you something important. Did Dr. Rodriguez work with cases like Tommy's?" Elena paused in her preparation, her hands stilling on a resistance band. "Yes, many cases." "And the recovery rates?" "Higher than what you were told to expect," she said carefully. "Much higher." Marcus felt anger rising in him again, but this time it wasn't directed at Elena. "Why wouldn't Dr. Wellington have known about this research?" Elena's expression grew diplomatic. "American medical schools don't always teach about international research, especially when it challenges established protocols. Dr. Rodriguez's work is well known in Latin America and parts of Europe, but here," she shrugged, "here doctors prefer certainty over possibilities." That afternoon, Marcus did something he hadn't done since Tommy's accident. He allowed himself to hope. As he watched his son work through Elena's exercises with determination and joy, he began to see not a disabled child learning to cope, but a healing child learning to overcome. But it was Tommy himself who delivered the question that would change everything. "Elena," the boy said during a water break, his 7-year-old mind working through complexities that adults often missed, "if you're a real physical therapist, and you know how to help kids like me get better, why were you working as our housekeeper?" Elena's face went very still, and Marcus saw something flicker in her eyes. Not guilt, but the kind of careful consideration that came before a difficult truth. Because, mijo, she said slowly, sometimes we take jobs that don't use all our skills because we need them for other reasons. Sometimes the money we make in one place helps us pay for very important things somewhere else. Marcus felt the pieces of a larger puzzle beginning to arrange themselves in his mind. Elena's old car, her simple apartment, her reluctance to discuss personal matters. And now, most telling of all, her willingness to work far below her qualifications for a family she barely knew. "Elena," he said softly, "what aren't you telling us?" She looked between Marcus and Tommy, her expression weighing something important. Finally, she took a deep breath that seemed to come from somewhere very deep inside her. "The money I earned working for you," she said quietly, "was paying for my own daughter's medical treatments. Treatments for a condition that American doctors said was impossible to cure." The room went completely silent except for the sound of Tommy's slightly labored breathing. Marcus felt something shift in his chest, a recognition that this conversation was about to go in a direction that would change all of their lives. "Your daughter?" he managed to ask. Elena nodded, her eyes bright with tears that she was trying not to shed. "Sophia. She's 8 years old and she's been fighting for her life since she was born. The treatments that might save her are only available in Germany. And the cost." She paused. "The cost is exactly what you paid me over the 2 years I worked for you." Marcus felt the world rearrange itself around this revelation. Elena hadn't just been helping Tommy out of kindness or professional duty. She had been fighting to save her own child's life, using every dollar she earned to fund a desperate battle against time and medical impossibility. "What's wrong with Sophia?" Tommy asked, his child's directness cutting through the adult hesitation in the room. Elena smiled at him with infinite tenderness. "She has a very rare condition that affects her heart and lungs, but there are doctors in Europe who think they can fix it, who have fixed it for other children. I've been saving money to take her there." Marcus's mind reeled as he processed the implications. Eleanor had spent 2 years caring for his family, helping his son, believing in recovery against medical odds, all while fighting her own desperate battle to save her daughter. And he had fired her just when she was closest to having enough money for Sophia's treatment. "How close were you?" he heard himself ask. "To having enough for the treatment?" Elena's smile was heartbreaking in its bravery. "Very close, maybe 2 more months of work." Tommy looked between his father and Elena with the kind of clarity that only children possess. "Daddy, we have to help Sophia. If Elena helped me learn to walk again, we have to help her save her daughter." In that moment, Marcus Sullivan, the man who had built an empire through calculated risks and strategic thinking, realized that the most important decision of his life had nothing to do with business at all. It had to do with understanding that miracles weren't just about what you believed was possible, but about what you were willing to do to make the impossible happen. And tomorrow would bring a revelation that would prove that sometimes the greatest miracles happen when 2 families refuse to give up on each other. Drop a comment and tell me what you think is about to happen. This story is building to something massive. The call came at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after Elena's return. Marcus was in his home gym, trying to work off the nervous energy that had plagued him since he'd made the decision that would either save 2 children or destroy his family's financial future. He had quietly liquidated 2 investment portfolios and sold his collection of vintage cars to gather the money for Sophia's treatment in Germany. Eleanor didn't know yet. He was waiting for the right moment to tell her. "Mr. Sullivan," Dr. Wellington's voice was strained, unusual for a man who typically delivered news with clinical detachment. "I need to see you immediately. It's about Tommy's medical files." "What about them?" Marcus asked, pausing his workout. Something in the doctor's tone made his stomach clench with familiar dread. "I've been reviewing his case for a research paper, and I found something that changes everything. Something we missed in the initial diagnosis. Can you be here within the hour?" Marcus was in Dr. Wellington's office 45 minutes later, still in his workout clothes, his mind racing through possibilities. The doctor's usually immaculate office looked disheveled, with Tommy's medical files spread across the desk like evidence from a crime scene. "Marcus, I need to start with an apology that might not mean much, but I need to say it anyway. Dr. Wellington removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. I made an error, not in Tommy's treatment, but in his diagnosis. An error that has cost your family 3 years of unnecessary despair. What kind of error? Marcus's voice was deadly quiet. Dr. Wellington pulled out a set of MRI images and placed them side by side. These are Tommy's spinal images from the day of his accident. And these, he indicated the second set, are images we took last month during his routine follow-up. Marcus, your son's spinal cord was never completely severed. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. What? The damage was severe, yes, but there was always neural pathway continuity. What I interpreted as complete severance was actually severe swelling and bruising that has been gradually healing over the past 3 years. The improvement has been so slow that we missed it in regular examinations. Marcus stared at the images, seeing differences that should have been obvious to trained eyes. You're saying he could have been walking this entire time? Not walking normally, no. But with proper rehabilitation focused on neural pathway recovery rather than adaptation to permanent disability, he could have been making the kind of progress that... Dr. Wellington paused, his expression pained. The kind of progress that Elena was documenting in those notes you showed me yesterday. The room spun around Marcus as the implications hit him. Elena hadn't just been offering hope, she had been correctly identifying signs of healing that the medical team had missed. Her background in pediatric rehabilitation had allowed her to see what Tommy's expensive specialists had overlooked. How is this possible? Marcus asked, his voice hollow. Initial trauma imaging is difficult to interpret accurately. We err on the side of preparing families for the worst possible outcome rather than giving false hope. In Tommy's case, we were so focused on managing expectations that we stopped looking for signs of recovery. Dr. Wellington pulled out another file. I've spent the past week consulting with colleagues, reviewing Elena's documentation, and researching Dr. Rodriguez's methods. Marcus, with intensive neuroplasticity therapy, the kind Elena has been providing, Tommy's prognosis is completely different. Not just improvement, potential full recovery. Marcus felt the air leave his lungs. Full recovery. Within 6 months to 2 years with consistent therapy. His nervous system has been healing itself this entire time. We just weren't supporting that healing appropriately. The drive home was a blur of rage, relief, and devastating regret. 3 years of telling his son to accept limitations that had never been real. 3 years of Elena watching Tommy improve while being treated as just a housekeeper. 3 years of stealing hope from a child who had every reason to believe in miracles. When he walked into the house, he found Elena and Tommy in the middle of their afternoon session. Elena was guiding Tommy through exercises that Marcus now recognized as sophisticated neurological rehabilitation disguised as play. Tommy was laughing, working harder than Marcus had seen him work in years, completely unaware that his entire world was about to change. Elena, Marcus said, his voice rough with emotion, we need to talk. She looked up from where she was helping Tommy with a balance exercise, immediately sensing the gravity in his tone. Tommy, can you practice your visualization exercises for a few minutes while your daddy and I talk? Is everything okay? Tommy asked, his 7-year-old intuition picking up on the tension. Everything is going to be more than okay, Marcus said, the words feeling like a promise he was finally qualified to make. Eleanor followed him into the hall, her expression concerned but patient. Marcus struggled to find words that could convey the magnitude of what he had learned, the weight of 3 years of medical malpractice that had stolen so much from all of them. Dr. Wellington called this morning, he began. Eleanor, Tommy's spinal cord was never completely severed. He's been healing this entire time, and we've been treating him for a condition that was misdiagnosed from the beginning. Eleanor's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes filling with tears that seemed to carry 3 years of vindication and relief. I knew it, she whispered. I felt it in his muscle responses, in the way he moved. But I thought. I hoped I wasn't wrong, but I was afraid to say too much. You were right about everything, Marcus said, his voice breaking slightly. The exercises you've been doing with him, they're exactly what he needed. Dr. Wellington says that with continued therapy, Tommy could walk normally again, maybe even run. Elena leaned against the wall, overwhelmed by the implications. All this time he could have been getting better. All this time he was getting better, because of you, despite what the rest of us believed was possible. They stood in silence for a moment, processing the weight of this revelation. Then Elena straightened, her expression shifting from shock to something that looked like fierce determination. "Then we don't waste another day," she said firmly. "If Tommy has been healing naturally, imagine what he can accomplish with proper support and the right therapy program." "Elena, there's something else," Marcus said, reaching into his jacket pocket for the envelope he had been carrying for days. "About Sophia's treatment." Elena's expression became guarded. "Marcus, I appreciate everything you've done by bringing me back, but I can't accept charity." "It's not charity," Marcus interrupted, handing her the envelope. "It's an investment in miracles, in believing that impossible things can happen when the right people refuse to give up." Eleanor opened the envelope with trembling fingers, her eyes widening as she saw the bank draft for the full amount needed for Sophia's treatment in Germany. "Marcus, this is too much. I can't—" "You can, and you will," Marcus said firmly, "because your daughter deserves the same chance at a miracle that you've been giving my son. Because faith works both ways." Elena's tears came freely now, and for a moment she couldn't speak. When she finally found her voice, it was thick with emotion. "Sophia's surgery is scheduled for next month in Berlin. I was going to have to choose between staying to help Tommy and saving my daughter. Now you don't have to choose," Marcus said. "We'll arrange for you to take Tommy with you to Germany. Dr. Rodriguez has colleagues there who can continue his therapy while Sophia receives her treatment. 2 children, 2 chances at healing, 1 journey." From the living room came Tommy's excited voice. "Elena, Daddy, come quick, I think I moved my toe. Think—" Elena and Marcus rushed back to find Tommy staring down at his foot with wonder and concentration. As they watched, his big toe moved distinctly, clearly, intentionally. "I felt it," Tommy whispered, his voice filled with awe. "I actually felt my toe move." Elena knelt beside his wheelchair, her hands gentle on his legs. "How does it feel, mijo?" "Like waking up," Tommy said, his child's wisdom cutting straight to the heart of what was happening. "Like my legs are waking up from a very long sleep." Marcus watched his son experience sensation he hadn't felt in 3 years and realized that Elena had given them more than hope. She had given them back the future they thought they had lost forever. But as Elena's phone rang with news from Germany about Sophia's condition, none of them knew that the greatest test of their newfound faith was still ahead. Some miracles, they would learn, required more courage than any of them imagined they possessed. The journey to Germany would reveal secrets about Elena's past, about Sophia's condition, and about the true meaning of sacrifice that would forever change how Marcus understood the difference between having money and having wealth. And Tommy's recovery would prove to be just the beginning of a much larger story about what becomes possible when people refuse to accept that love isn't enough to change the world. You've been on this incredible journey with us. Hit like and comment with your thoughts, because this ending will leave you speechless. The Hans Rudolf Willig's Children's Hospital in Berlin was nothing like the sterile American medical facilities Marcus had grown accustomed to. Warm colors, natural light, and artwork created by former patients lined the hallways where Tommy wheeled himself alongside Sophia Morales for the first time. Meeting Elena's 8-year-old daughter had been like watching Tommy discover he wasn't alone in his battle. Sophia's fight against a rare congenital heart and lung condition had given her the same fierce determination that was now driving Tommy's recovery. "She's beautiful," Tommy had whispered when Elena first introduced them at the airport, and Marcus had been struck by the immediate bond between the 2 children who understood better than any adult what it meant to fight for the right to simply exist fully in the world. Dr. Ingrid Hoffmann, Sophia's surgeon, was a woman in her 50s whose reputation for performing impossible operations was matched only by her unusual approach to treating families as complete units rather than individual cases. When she reviewed Tommy's files during their first consultation, her reaction confirmed everything Eleanor had believed. "This child should never have been told he couldn't walk," she said bluntly, her German accent making the words sound even more definitive. "The neural pathways are clearly intact, just dormant. With Elena's therapy and our intensive program, full recovery is not just possible, It's probable. Marcus had wanted to feel vindicated, but instead he felt the crushing weight of 3 years of stolen possibility. 3 years of watching his son learn to accept limits that had never been real. Sophia's surgery was scheduled for the following week, a complex procedure that would require replacing a defective valve and repairing lung tissue that had never properly developed. The risks were substantial, but Dr. Hoffman's confidence was infectious. More importantly, Sophia herself faced the upcoming operation with a courage that humbled everyone around her. "If I can breathe better, I can help Tommy walk faster," she told Marcus one evening as they sat in the hospital's family lounge. Her English was accented but clear, and her logic had the devastating clarity that only children possess. Eleanor was dividing her time between Sophia's pre-surgical preparation and Tommy's intensive therapy sessions with the German medical team. Marcus watched her navigate both challenges with a grace that made him understand something fundamental about strength that his business success had never taught him. "How do you do it?" he asked her one night as they sat in the hotel restaurant after both children were asleep. "How do you stay hopeful when everything is uncertain?" Eleanor considered the question while watching rain streak the windows of the Berlin hotel. "In Mexico, we have a saying, La esperanza es lo último que se pierde. Hope is the last thing we lose. When you lose hope, you lose everything else too. So we hold on to it even when holding on hurts." "I lost hope 3 years ago," Marcus admitted. "I was so afraid of Tommy getting hurt again that I decided certainty was safer than possibility." "You didn't lose hope," Elena said gently. "You just forgot where you put it." But it was still there waiting for the right moment to come back. The night before Sophia's surgery, both children were unusually quiet. Tommy had made remarkable progress during their 2 weeks in Berlin, not just physically, but emotionally. Working with Sophia had given him a sense of purpose beyond his own recovery, and Elena's constant presence had restored the confidence that Marcus's fear had slowly eroded. "Elena," Sophia said, as her mother tucked her into the hospital bed, "if something happens to me tomorrow, will you promise to keep helping Tommy? He needs you." "Nothing is going to happen to you," Elena said firmly. "Dr. Hoffman is the best in the world, and you are stronger than your condition. Tomorrow, we're going to fix your heart so you can live the beautiful life you were meant to have." Marcus, standing in the doorway, felt something break open inside his chest. This family, Elena and Sophia, had been fighting a life-or-death battle while Elena spent her days nurturing his son back to health. The depth of sacrifice, the strength required to maintain hope while facing such overwhelming odds, made his own struggles feel small in comparison. Surgery day dawned crisp and clear, and as Sophia was wheeled into the operating room, she looked back at Tommy and gave him a thumbs up. "See you on the other side, walking buddy," she called out. The 8-hour wait was the longest day of Marcus's life. Elena sat motionless in the waiting room, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white, while Tommy dozed fitfully in his wheelchair beside her. Marcus found himself praying for the first time since Sarah's funeral, bargaining with whatever cosmic forces might be listening. When Dr. Hoffman finally emerged from surgery, still in her surgical scrubs, her smile told them everything they needed to know before she spoke a single word. "Perfect," she said simply. "Sophia's surgery was absolutely perfect. Her new valve is working beautifully, and the lung repair exceeded our best-case projections. She's going to have a completely normal life." Eleanor collapsed into sobs that seemed to come from 3 years of held-back terror and exhaustion. Marcus held her as she cried, this woman who had saved his son while fighting to save her own daughter, and understood that some kinds of wealth couldn't be measured in dollars. 3 months later, back in Chicago, Marcus stood in his backyard watching Tommy chase Sophia across the grass. Both children were running, Tommy with a slight limp that Dr. Hoffman assured them would disappear with continued therapy, and Sophia with breath that came easily for the first time in her life. Elena approached from the house carrying lemonade and wearing the smile that had become constant since Sophia's recovery. "They're going to wear themselves out," she said, but her tone was pure joy. "Elena," Marcus said, "I need to ask you something important." She looked at him curiously, setting down the tray. "Will you marry me?" Elena's eyes widened in shock. It wasn't the proposal Marcus had planned. He had intended something more formal, more traditional. But watching their children play together, seeing the family they had accidentally created through shared crisis and mutual faith, the question had simply fallen out of his heart. "Marcus," Elena said softly, "that's not why I came back. That's not why any of this happened." "I know," Marcus said. "But Elena, somewhere in the middle of saving our children, we saved each other too. I don't want a housekeeper or even just a therapist. I want a partner. I want someone who believes in impossible things and makes them happen. I want you." Elena was quiet for a long moment, watching Sophia teach Tommy a Spanish song while they played. When she finally spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, because sometimes the most beautiful families are the ones that build themselves from broken pieces." 6 months later, at Tommy and Sophia's joint birthday party in the mansion's backyard, Marcus watched his son run, without any limp at all, while Sophia performed cartwheels that would have been impossible with her old heart condition. The children were inseparable now, siblings in every way that mattered. Dr. Wellington attended the party, and as he watched Tommy play soccer with other children, he shook his head in amazement. "In 30 years of practice, I've never seen anything quite like this recovery. Elena's methods, combined with the neural healing that was already happening, created results that shouldn't have been medically possible." "Maybe that's the point," Marcus replied, his arm around Elena's shoulders. "Maybe the best miracles happen when we stop worrying about what should be possible and start focusing on what is possible when people love each other enough." Elena squeezed his hand and smiled. "Besides," she said, watching their children play, "we had the best motivation in the world. 2 children who refused to give up on themselves even when the adults around them had given up." As the sun set over the birthday celebration, Tommy ran to Marcus and Elena with Sophia close behind. "Daddy Elena," he said, slightly out of breath but glowing with happiness, "Sophia wants to know if she can call you Daddy too, like I call Elena Mama." Marcus knelt down to both children's eye level, his throat tight with emotion. "I think," he said carefully, "that sounds perfect." That night, as Marcus tucked both children into their beds in rooms that had been redecorated to accommodate Sophia's permanent place in their family, he reflected on how fundamentally his understanding of wealth had changed. The money he had spent on Sophia's surgery had been returned to him tenfold through the joy of watching both children heal. The empire he had built meant nothing compared to the family that had built itself around the simple act of refusing to accept that some dreams were impossible. Eleanor found him standing in the hallway, still processing the magnitude of their transformed life. "Regrets?" she asked softly. Marcus pulled her close, breathing in the scent of jasmine that she wore, the same fragrance that had filled their home the day everything changed. "Only one," he said. "I regret that it took me so long to understand that the greatest investment I could ever make was believing in the people I love." From Sophia's room came the sound of quiet laughter as Tommy told her stories about the mansion's many rooms. From the living room came the gentle ticking of the grandfather clock that had marked so many hopeless hours, but now measured time filled with infinite possibility. And in that moment, Marcus Sullivan understood that miracles weren't rare at all. They were everywhere, waiting for people brave enough to believe in them, work for them, and love each other enough to make the impossible happen. Sometimes the greatest fortunes aren't built in boardrooms or investment portfolios. Sometimes they're built in the quiet moments when families choose faith over fear, when strangers become family, and when love proves stronger than every limitation the world tries to impose. The mansion that had once been a tomb had become a sanctuary, and the children who had been told to accept less had taught the adults around them that acceptance was just another word for giving up. In the end, Eleanor had been right about everything. Sometimes our bodies just need more time and more love to remember how to work right. And sometimes the people who love us need the same thing.